Have you ever wondered what wisdom truly is? Do people around you seem to define wisdom as timid caution or perhaps burdensome rule keeping? Are you curious about how you might acquire wisdom? Join us for a series on wisdom and the Proverbs. Welcome back to Working Faith. On this channel, we strive to inform you about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the nature of true faith in that gospel, and how faith works itself out in the life of a believer. I've been thinking about the book of Proverbs for quite some time now, and it keeps coming up in conversation at my church. And that's driven me to really investigate the definition of wisdom, among other things. So I wanted to share the results of that study with all of you. I'll acknowledge from the beginning that Proverbs is not the only book of the Bible from which we can derive wisdom, but I do believe that the book of Proverbs is the most concentrated explanation of what wisdom is in the entire world. In this video, I want to lay out some facts about wisdom that would give you a foundation for your own deeper study into the book of Proverbs. I want to lay out some facts about wisdom that would help us to define it. And in the next video, we're going to use that definition to make some observations about Proverbs generally. Sometime in the future, I might do a brief walkthrough of the entire book so that we can see how those definitions and observations play out in deeper study together. Proverbs 18:4 says that the words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. So, deep waters ahead. The first thing that I want to note both about wisdom and about the book of Proverbs, and I'm calling it point zero because of that, is that the Proverbs are true. 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is inspired by God, literally breathed out, and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness. So 2 Timothy 3:16 says that every book of the Bible is breathed out by God and is profitable for all of those uses. And so the book of Proverbs wouldn't be any exception to that. But if you want to see how the New Testament uses Proverbs, I have a couple of references to show that the New Testament authors think that Proverbs is true in the same way that any other Old Testament book is true. Hebrews 12:5 says, "And you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him." So where did the author of Hebrews get that? Proverbs 3:11, which says, "My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord." So the author of Hebrews thinks that that command from Proverbs is applicable to the New Testament audience that he's addressing. 1 Peter 4:8 says, "Above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins." Love covers a multitude of sins is Proverbs 10:12. So Peter thinks that that principle, which is different from a commandment, that principle from Proverbs is applicable to a New Testament audience. And so we see between those two verses that both commands and principles from Proverbs are used as proof for what New Testament authors want to communicate. So moving into the Proverbs themselves, I want to see what they can tell us about wisdom. And the first principle that I derive from the Proverbs about wisdom is that wisdom is not equal to caution. Proverbs 13:16 says, "Every prudent man acts with knowledge, but a fool displays folly." Proverbs 15:19 says, "The way of the lazy is as a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway." What does it mean by highway? It means that the way is speedy, it's paved, it's free of obstructions, which means that the wise man is able to move swiftly. And Proverbs 21:22 says that a wise man scales the city of the mighty and brings down the stronghold in which they trust. There are plenty of proverbs about having careful thought as well, make no mistake, but often those who are overly cautious, even to the point of fear, are treated in our culture as if they're wise. Wisdom involves a balance between careful consideration and bold action. That scaling the city of the mighty and bringing down a stronghold in which they trust is the kind of action that would make a lot of people afraid. But the wise man has no problem with taking that action because he has planned carefully. A second principle to be derived about wisdom from the Proverbs is that wisdom is not equal to righteousness. Proverbs 2:9, then you will discern righteousness and justice and equity and every good course. So you can see in that verse that wisdom and righteousness are related. Wisdom allows you to discern righteousness, but that would already tell you that they're not exactly the same thing. If you already have wisdom and that's allowing you to discern righteousness, that means that they can't be the same thing, or otherwise you'd already have the righteousness. You wouldn't need to discern it. But Proverbs 3:19 and 20 really helps to make that case. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the deeps were broken up and the skies drip with dew. Righteousness is moral standing. It's fulfilling moral obligations. And if wisdom was the same thing as righteousness, that would be to say that the Lord was fulfilling a moral obligation in founding the earth. And that doesn't really make sense. What does make sense is to say that he founded the earth in an optimal way, that he founded the earth in a good and sensible way. And so that's what it means when it says that he did that by wisdom. So wisdom can't be the same thing as righteousness. Before I move on, I just want to make a brief point about how our culture treats words. We often don't really care about the definitions of the words that we're using, and you can see in these first couple of points that I am struggling to make sure that we differentiate words that should be differentiated rather than conflating them. We are the kind of culture that would introduce ourselves to a conversation by saying something like, "How's it hanging?" And those words don't really mean anything. We could say something like, "How are you feeling today?" And that would communicate probably the idea that we're really getting at. But we have a tendency to just use words flippantly and expect people to get the meaning from not the surface grammar that we're using, but sort of the words all put together into various idioms and phrases. The scriptures are not written in that sort of manner, and I think it's important that we treat the words of Proverbs and the rest of the scriptures with care so that we can really understand what they mean. And that's why I'm taking so long to carefully mine the depths of the Proverbs for things about wisdom so that we can get it right and distinguish it from other things that sometimes it's conflated with. Point number 3, wisdom can be acquired. Proverbs 4:5-8 just directly states that. Acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget nor turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will guard you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom, and with all your acquiring get understanding. Prize her, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. So wisdom can definitely be acquired by intentional action. In fact, Solomon is saying that it's one of the first principles of wisdom that you would understand, that you should be acquiring wisdom intentionally. This is another thing that helps to distinguish it from righteousness, because the early chapters of Romans teach us that righteousness can't be acquired by striving. It has to be given as a gift through faith. Wisdom is not the same. Wisdom can be acquired if you just seek after it. But number 4 is wisdom can be received. Proverbs 4, 1 and 2 says, "Hear, O sons, the instruction of a father, and give attention that you may gain understanding. For I give you sound teaching, do not abandon my instruction." Solomon is telling his sons that the wisdom that he has, he can give to them by teaching them. So wisdom's not just something that we can acquire with intentional action, it's also something that we can receive. That's from human beings, but James 1:5 says that we can receive wisdom from God as well. "But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him." And don't forget that Solomon, who authored most of the Proverbs, receives it from God in 1 Kings 4:29. Now God gave Solomon wisdom and very great discernment and breadth of mind, like the sand that is on the seashore. These last two statements I want to make about wisdom before coming to a definition of it are, I think, the most important because they're the most often repeated throughout the Proverbs. Number 5, wisdom is about how, not just what. Proverbs 8:14 through 16. "Counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding. Power is mine. By me kings reign, and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, all who judge rightly." Kings and princes reign by wisdom. Wisdom isn't just telling them that they should reign, it's telling them how they should reign to be effective. Proverbs 13:11 says, "Wealth obtained by fraud dwindles, but the one who gathers by labor increases it." Wisdom doesn't just tell you that you should increase your wealth, it tells you that you should increase your wealth by labor, because if you did it by fraud, it will quickly disappear. Proverbs 15:1. "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." The proverb isn't just telling you to respond to things that are wrong, it's telling you that you should respond to things that are wrong gently rather than harshly. And Proverbs 16:23, "The heart of the wise instructs his mouth and adds persuasiveness to his lips." This is another principle that distinguishes it from righteousness because that's a matter of do this or don't do that, whereas wisdom tells you how to do whatever it is that you're planning on doing. And finally, principle number 6, wisdom has tangible positive results. Proverbs 1:6, "To understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles." To have wisdom allows you to understand what wise people are saying. 133, "But he who listens to me shall live securely and will be at ease from the dread of evil." Proverbs 3:7 through 10, "Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce. So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine." 426, "Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established." 11:30 and 31, "The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who is wise wins souls. If the righteous will be rewarded in the earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner?" And 21:22, which we already read, "A wise man scales the city of the mighty and brings down the stronghold in which they trust." That's a lot of tangible positive results, and that's nowhere near an exhaustive list from just the Proverbs. Now let's put those facts together into a definition of wisdom. I would define wisdom as the understanding of how to act optimally. Wisdom is the understanding of how to act optimally. You've probably heard a lot of people include in a definition of wisdom the action itself. I can see where they're coming from because Proverbs has a lot of actions that wise people undertake. But I think that I don't need that in the definition because if you understand how to act optimally, that would include the knowledge that acting rightly is more optimal than not acting. Proverbs has lots of things to say about laziness. Wise people are not lazy, so that they understand that acting optimally includes acting itself. Most likely, as I went through the verses, or if you're already familiar with Proverbs, you've noticed that wisdom and righteousness are constantly being connected, even though I've been making the case throughout this video that they're not exactly the same thing. But this definition should help to make the proper connection, because to act in God's universe optimally involves acting according to his rules. That's just the beginning of acting optimally. Note that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and not the end of wisdom. But playing according to the rules of the game is always necessary to win the game. It's just not sufficient. You also need to know how to make the best legal moves. So I'd like to make an analogy to the game of basketball. If you were playing basketball and every time you got the ball, you just dribbled in place ad infinitum until somebody took the ball away from you, you would be playing the game legally. It's not as if you body slammed somebody away from the ball or something like that. But that legal playing of the game will definitely ensure that you'll get a talking to from a coach at any level. Because while you're playing the game within the rules, you're definitely not helping your team to win. I also think that my definition helps to explain number 5. After all, if you act optimally, you can certainly expect that the results will be optimal. Of course, there's a caveat there for God's sovereignty, which we'll explore further in part 2. But for now, let's review the definition of wisdom and compare it against the facts that formed it. Wisdom is the understanding of how to act optimally. That makes it not the same thing as righteousness, which only gives us the rules. It makes it not the same thing as timid caution, because inaction is not optimal. That makes it something that can be acquired through intentional action, because practice makes you better at making the optimal moves. It's something that can be received as a gift, because God already understands everything, and people with more experience than us can coach us in the optimal way to get things done that they've seen working in their lives. It's about how to do things, not just what to do, and it makes perfect sense that it would have tangible results. To wrap up this video, I want to take a look at a passage that says a lot about wisdom in the New Testament to see if our definition that we got from the Proverbs holds up as we go through that context. So 1 Corinthians 1, 20 through 25 says, "For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For indeed Jews ask for signs, and Greeks search for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, to Jews a stumbling block, and to Gentiles foolishness. But to those who are the called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God, and the wisdom of God. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men." There is a wisdom that is in the world. The world through its wisdom, the Greeks search for wisdom, etc. People throughout history have been playing various games with various objectives, and they've learned a lot about how they can do that optimally. But human wisdom can only get you so far. We need Christ, the wisdom who comes from God, to be able to understand what it is we really should be optimizing. The Christian endeavor is one of pleasing God, of winning souls, of storing up treasure in heaven. If we want to get better at doing that, we aren't going to be able to get much help from human wisdom. We need the help of God and of his children to know how to act optimally on the path of righteousness. Next time, we'll unpack some of the Proverbs more fully with our definition in mind, and explain some of the difficulties in applying the Proverbs today. Until then, show your faith by your works.